Chapter 1. The Vanishing at Blackwood Hall. The autumn wind howled through the twisted trees lining the long drive to Blackwood Hall, the ancient country estate of Sir Reginald Willoughby. The manor itself stood as a monolith against the stormy sky, its ivy-clad stone walls appearing almost menacing in the dim light of dusk, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived in a sleek black motor car. The great iron gates creaked open before them, as if the house itself had been expecting them. "This place has the look of a proper ghost story," Hastings murmured, peering at the high gabled windows, some still lit with a golden glow. Poirot merely adjusted his gloves, his keen grey eyes taking in every detail of the grand estate. "Mon ami, there is no greater ghost than that of a mystery yet unsolved." They had come at the urgent request of Lady Margaret Willoughby, a woman of considerable composure, though her letter had been filled with an uncharacteristic desperation. A mystery had gripped Blackwood Hall. Her trusted butler, Geoffrey Martin, had vanished without a trace 2 nights ago. There had been no sign of struggle, no letter of resignation, no logical explanation for his disappearance. The moment they stepped inside, the scent of old wood and lavender polish greeted them, mingling with the faintest trace of something else. Something neither Poirot nor Hastings could place. The butler's absence was already evident in the hall's disarray. A single candlestick on the grand oak table had toppled over, wax hardened mid-drip. An untouched tray of tea left abandoned near the library door. Lady Willoughby awaited them in the drawing-room, a severe woman with silvering hair pinned in an elegant coil. Despite her usual grace, her hands trembled as she offered them tea, her gaze searching Poirot's face for answers he had not yet uncovered. "I don't understand it, Monsieur Poirot. Geoffrey has served this house for over 20 years. He was devoted, meticulous. He would never have simply left," she said, voice tight with restrained emotion. Poirot leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "And yet, Lady Willoughby, people rarely disappear without reason. Tell me, was there anything unusual in his behaviour before he vanished?" She hesitated. "Now that you mention it, he seemed uneasy in the days leading up to his disappearance. Distracted, as though something weighed on his mind. I caught him once, staring out of the window as if expecting someone." Hastings frowned. "Did he confide in anyone?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But there is someone who might know more. The housemaid, Alice. She and Geoffrey were quite close." Poirot inclined his head. "Then let us speak with Mademoiselle Alice at once." Alice was found in the servants' quarters, a young woman with dark, worried eyes and hands reddened from scrubbing the great stone floors. She curtsied hastily when introduced, but did not hide her distress. "Sir, I know something's happened to him." Geoffrey was frightened. He wouldn't tell me why, but he kept saying that the past never stays buried. I think he knew. Something dangerous." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Did he mention anyone? Perhaps an old acquaintance?" She swallowed. "No, sir, but I did see something strange. The night before he vanished, I heard him arguing with someone outside, near the rose garden," Lady Willoughby gasped. "Who was it?" Alice shook her head. "I don't know. I couldn't see them, only a shadow moving beyond the hedge. When I asked Geoffrey about it later, he brushed it off, said it was nothing." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "It is never nothing. The night had long settled by the time Poirot ventured outside, his patent leather shoes crunching against the gravel path. The rose garden lay still, bathed in the silvery light of a waning moon. He crouched, examining the ground. A disturbance, faint but evident, suggested recent activity. Something glittered near the base of a shrub. Poirot retrieved it carefully, holding the object up to the light. A cufflink, its gold surface engraved with an intricate W. Hastings peered over his shoulder. A Willoughby family crest. Poirot nodded. Perhaps, or a clue pointing toward one. Before they could ponder further, a sharp cry rang through the night, the sound of a body falling. Poirot turned just in time to see the shape of a man collapsing near the stables. Hastings rushed forward, while Poirot followed at a measured pace. They found him sprawled across the damp grass, a footman, gasping in terror. "It's him! It's him!" he stammered, pointing toward the darkness. Poirot frowned. "Who, mon ami? Who did you see?" The man clutched at his shirt, struggling for breath. "Geoffrey, the butler. But he's dead." A chilling silence settled over them. Poirot bent down, his voice gentle. "Tell me exactly what you saw." The footman swallowed. "I was closing up the carriage-house, sir. I turned, and he was there, standing in the moonlight. But his face, it was all wrong. He looked at me as though he didn't see me at all. And then he was gone." A ghostly butler? Hastings scoffed, but Poirot remained deep in thought. "Tell me, did he say anything?" The footman hesitated. "One word. Beware." A shiver ran down Hastings's spine. "Well, that's unsettling." Poirot straightened, dusting off his coat. "Indeed, mon ami, and it confirms what I already suspected." Hastings blinked. "Which is?" Poirot's expression was unreadable. "That Geoffrey Martin has not vanished at all. He has been made to vanish." Lady Willoughby gasped. "You mean he's been murdered?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "That remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. Someone wanted him gone, and that someone will not stop until their secret remains buried forever." A low gust of wind stirred the trees, and from somewhere in the house a floorboard creaked. The game had begun. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Hall. The tension within Blackwood Hall thickened like an approaching storm. The strange sighting of Geoffrey Martin, the butler who had vanished without a trace, had sent whispers through the estate, and even the stern Lady Willoughby seemed unnerved. Despite the grand fireplaces burning in every corridor, a chill hung in the air, as though the very walls had absorbed the unease. Hercule Poirot sat in the grand drawing-room, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest of a plush chair, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Hastings, pacing before the hearth, cast Poirot a look of lingering doubt. "Now look here, Poirot," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll grant you, a missing butler is cause for concern. But a ghost, that's a bit far-fetched?" Poirot smiled slightly, his moustache twitching. "Mais non, Hastings. It is not a ghost that concerns me. It is the illusion of one." Hastings frowned. "You think someone is pretending to be Geoffrey Martin?" Poirot nodded. "Or perhaps, mon ami, someone wishes us to believe that Geoffrey is still among the living when in truth he is not." Lady Willoughby's fingers tightened around the delicate porcelain of her teacup. "But why?" she asked in a hushed tone. Why would anyone go to such lengths? That is precisely what we must discover, Poirot said, rising. And to do so, we must begin with the last known moments before Geoffrey Martin vanished. He turned to Alice, the young maid who had been closest to Geoffrey. "Mademoiselle, you said you last saw him 2 nights ago." Alice nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. After dinner he was clearing the dining room. That was the last time I saw him. And you heard him arguing with someone in the rose garden that same night?" "Yes, sir." Poirot tapped his chin. "Then let us retrace his steps." Hastings, Poirot, and Lady Willoughby followed Alice down the dimly lit hallways of Blackwood Hall. The walls were lined with portraits of long-dead Willoughbys, their painted eyes watching solemnly as the small group passed beneath their gilded frames. Alice led them into the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a grand mahogany table. The air smelled faintly of wax and old wood. Poirot moved to the butler's station by the sideboard, his eyes scanning the polished surfaces. "Did he say anything to you that night?" Poirot asked Alice. She hesitated. "He was nervous. When I asked if he was all right, he said he had to take care of something, that he'd been waiting too long." "Waiting for what, I wonder?" Poirot mused. He examined the silverware on the sideboard, then bent to inspect the rug. A faint indentation in the carpet caught his eye. Kneeling, he traced the outline of what appeared to be a small wooden box, long gone. Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Something was here, wasn't it?" "Oui, Hastings. Something that Geoffrey placed here, and something that someone else did not want found." Lady Willoughby's breath caught. "You mean to say he had evidence of something?" Poirot dusted off his knees and straightened. "It is a distinct possibility. Now, to the rose garden." They stepped out into the cold night air. The wind rustled the hedges, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and roses wilting with the season. Poirot led the way along the gravel path, his sharp eyes scanning the ground. Alice hesitated. "This is where I heard him," she said. "He was standing right over there, near the stone bench." Poirot approached the bench and crouched, running his fingers lightly along the ground. The gravel was uneven in one spot, as though someone had stood there for a long time, or struggled. A glint caught his eye. Poirot plucked a small object from the dirt and held it up to the moonlight. A button. Hastings frowned. "That looks like it came from a uniform." "Very astute, mon ami. A servant's uniform, to be precise." Lady Willoughby gasped. "Then Geoffrey was here that night." Poirot nodded, slipping the button into his pocket. "It would appear so. And if he was arguing with someone, that someone may have been the last person to see him alive." A sudden rustling in the hedge made Alice yelp. Hastings turned sharply. "Who's there?" A figure stepped forward, half-shadowed in the moonlight. It was a young man with sharp features, wearing a servant's vest. His eyes darted between them nervously. "William," Lady Willoughby said in surprise, "what are you doing out here?" William, a footman, hesitated before bowing his head. "Begging your pardon, my lady, I was just finishing my duties." Poirot studied him closely. "You were watching us, n'est-ce pas?" The young man hesitated. I only heard voices. I thought you might have found something." Poirot took a step closer. "Tell me, mon garçon, did you see Geoffrey on the night he disappeared?" William swallowed hard, his fingers twisting in his apron. "No, sir." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "A lie, I think." William's face paled. I swear, sir, I didn't mean to deceive you." Lady Willoughby's voice sharpened. "What do you know, William?" The young man hesitated, then sighed. "I saw Geoffrey that night. He was in the hall after dinner, pacing. He kept muttering to himself, and then he went outside. Did you see who he met?" William shook his head. "No, sir, but I did hear something strange." Poirot tilted his head. "Go on." William swallowed. "It was late. I was passing through the back hall when I heard a noise from the study. I peered inside, and I saw someone going through Sir Reginald's desk." Lady Willoughby gasped. "Sir Reginald's desk? But who—" "I don't know, my lady. I only saw a shadow. But they took something, a piece of paper, I think, and then they were gone." Poirot exchanged a look with Hastings. "And Geoffrey?" William bit his lip. I think he saw them too. That's why he was so frightened." A heavy silence fell over the group. Poirot straightened, his eyes gleaming. "Then we must examine the study." The study was a grand room lined with bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of leather and ink. A heavy desk sat in the centre, its surface adorned with papers, a globe, and a half-empty glass of brandy. Poirot ran his fingers along the edges of the desk, noting the faint smudges near the drawer handle. He pulled it open. "Empty." Lady Willoughby frowned. "There should be ledgers here. My husband kept records in this drawer." Poirot nodded. "Then someone did not want those records found." He glanced at Hastings. "Mon ami, we are dealing with a man who knew too much, and now he has paid the price." Hastings exhaled. "So you think Geoffrey was silenced?" Poirot's gaze darkened. "I think, mon ami, that we are only just beginning to uncover the secrets of Blackwood Hall." And as if to confirm his words, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a slow, deliberate creak from the hallway beyond. Someone was listening. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Corridor. A sharp silence followed the creak in the hallway. Poirot raised a hand, signalling for quiet. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the study walls as Hastings took a cautious step toward the door. "Who's there?" Hastings called, his voice firm but tinged with unease. No response. The corridor beyond was shrouded in darkness. Poirot, ever meticulous, moved toward the door and gently pushed it open. The hall stretched before them, its length punctuated by suits of armour and heavy curtains swaying slightly in the draught. Poirot gestured for Hastings to follow. "Come, mon ami. Let us see if our visitor is still near." Lady Willoughby and Alice remained in the study, their eyes wide with apprehension. William, the footman, fidgeted nervously, but did not dare move. Poirot stepped into the hallway, his small frame casting an elongated shadow in the candlelight. His sharp eyes scanned the corridor, noting the subtle shifts in the fabric of the heavy drapes. He moved toward them, reaching out gently to part the velvet folds. Nothing. Hastings exhaled, lowering his shoulders. "I suppose it was just the wind, Poirot." But Poirot was not convinced. He crouched low, fingers tracing the floorboards beneath the curtain. A smudge of mud marred the otherwise pristine wood. Poirot touched it lightly, rubbing the damp earth between his fingertips. "Non, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "Someone was standing here, listening." Hastings frowned. "But who?" Poirot straightened, brushing off his hands. "That, mon ami, is the question we must answer." Just then, a new sound echoed through the corridor. A distant, deliberate knock from the front door. Lady Willoughby gasped from the study. At this hour? William hesitated. "Shall I see who it is, my lady?" Poirot raised a hand. "No, I shall do it myself." He led the way through the darkened halls, Hastings close behind him. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Poirot reached the grand entrance, its tall wooden doors gleaming in the candlelight. With a measured breath, he turned the handle and pulled the door open. A figure stood on the threshold, wrapped in a long, heavy coat. The hood pulled low over their face. The wind howled behind them, sending dried leaves swirling across the marble floor as they stepped forward. "Who are you?" Hastings demanded, moving protectively beside Poirot. The stranger slowly lifted their head, revealing a sharp, gaunt face partially shadowed by the hood. Their eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Poirot's with an intensity that made even Hastings take an involuntary step back. "I need to speak with Lady Willoughby," the figure said, their voice low and urgent. Poirot tilted his head. "And whom do we have the pleasure of addressing?" The stranger hesitated, then lowered their hood, revealing a woman with striking features, high cheekbones, pale skin, and auburn hair pulled into a severe bun. "My name is Evelyn Blackwood," she said, "and I know what happened to Geoffrey Martin." A collective breath seemed to be drawn at once. Hastings turned to Lady Willoughby, who had just reached the entrance. The colour drained from her face. "Evelyn," she whispered, You disappeared years ago." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, and for good reason." Poirot stepped forward. "Mademoiselle Blackwood, perhaps you would like to tell us everything." Lady Willoughby hesitated. "Should we really—" Poirot raised a reassuring hand. "It is best that we hear her out, no?" After a moment's pause, Lady Willoughby nodded and stepped aside. Evelyn entered the grand hall, her eyes scanning her surroundings with a wariness that suggested she was not entirely comfortable being back at Blackwood Hall. Poirot led the way to the drawing-room, where the fireplace crackled warmly. Evelyn remained standing, arms crossed over her chest, as though bracing herself. Poirot gestured to a chair. "Please, mademoiselle." Evelyn hesitated before sitting stiffly. "You said you know what happened to Geoffrey Martin," Poirot prompted. Evelyn exhaled. "I do, but first I need to know, is Sir Reginald here?" A heavy silence followed. Lady Willoughby's face hardened. "He passed away 2 years ago." Evelyn flinched, as though she had not expected this news. She pressed a hand to her forehead, muttering under her breath, before looking up at Lady Willoughby. "Then I suppose I owe you an explanation." Poirot folded his hands neatly in his lap. "We are listening." Evelyn's gaze flickered to the fire. Geoffrey Martin was more than just a butler. He knew things about this house, about my family. He helped me disappear when I needed to. Lady Willoughby's hands trembled. You mean he aided you? Evelyn nodded. Yes, he was loyal to me when no one else was. She took a deep breath, and I fear that loyalty may have cost him his life. Hastings frowned. What do you mean? Evelyn hesitated. Before I left, I discovered something. Sir Reginald didn't want anyone to know. And now I believe Geoffrey might have uncovered it too. Poirot leaned forward. And what, precisely, did you discover? Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. Sir Reginald was involved in something dangerous, something criminal. Lady Willoughby gasped. That's impossible. Evelyn shook her head. I found documents, ledgers, coded messages. He was dealing with people who were not to be trusted. I confronted him, but he threatened me. She swallowed hard. That's when Geoffrey helped me leave. He warned me that if I stayed, I'd be in danger. Poirot tapped his chin. And now you believe Geoffrey discovered something that put him in danger as well? Evelyn nodded gravely. Yes, I think he found proof that could expose everything. Hastings rubbed his chin. The missing papers from the study. Poirot nodded. Exactement. He turned to Evelyn. Do you have any idea where Geoffrey might have hidden this proof? Evelyn hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. I don't know where he hid it, but I do know he sent me this. She pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the edges. Poirot took it carefully and examined the handwriting. It was scrawled but unmistakable. Geoffrey's handwriting, Lady Willoughby whispered. Poirot opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. The words were brief but chilling. They know, I have what they want. If I disappear, follow the numbers. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Numbers! A code, perhaps? Evelyn nodded. It must be. Geoffrey loved puzzles. If he left a clue, it would be hidden in something numerical. Poirot studied the paper once more before tucking it into his pocket. Then, mademoiselle, we must search for these numbers. Hastings exhaled. And quickly, before whoever took Geoffrey realizes we're onto them. As the fire crackled in the hearth, a new urgency filled the room. The secrets of Blackwood Hall were beginning to unravel, but the greatest mystery remained. Where was Geoffrey Martin? And had they already run out of time to save him? Chapter 4. The Numbers That Speak. The tension in the drawing-room was palpable. Evelyn Blackwood sat stiffly in her chair, her hands clenched in her lap, her gaze flickering between Poirot and the envelope that now rested in his grasp. Hastings shifted uneasily, casting glances at Lady Willoughby, whose face remained frozen. In disbelief, Poirot tapped the piece of paper lightly against his palm. These numbers Geoffrey speaks of, if they are truly a clue, then we must determine their significance. Evelyn nodded. Geoffrey had a mind for puzzles. If he left, numbers, they aren't random. They mean something. Hastings leaned forward. Could it be something as simple as an address, a bank account, a safe combination? Poirot held up a finger. Non, mon ami. If it were as simple as that, those who sought to silence him would have already found what they wanted. He turned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle, before you left Blackwood Hall, was there anywhere Geoffrey spent an unusual amount of time? A place he considered important? Evelyn frowned, thinking. Well, There was the servants' quarters, of course, but also the library. He spent a great deal of time there cataloguing Sir Reginald's collection. Lady Willoughby spoke for the first time in minutes, her voice quiet but firm. The library was Sir Reginald's most prized room. He kept meticulous records of every book. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, then perhaps our missing numbers are hidden within the pages of a book, no? Evelyn sat up straighter. That does make sense. Geoffrey loved codes, and what better place to hide one than in the library? Poirot wasted no time. He stood, straightened his cuffs, and gestured for the others to follow. Come, mes amis, we shall search the library for our clue. The group moved through the dimly lit corridors of Blackwood Hall, the flickering candlelight throwing their shadows against the ancient walls. The air smelled of old wood, wax, and something faintly musty, as though the secrets of the house had seeped into its very foundation. Lady Willoughby led them into the grand library. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, stretching from floor to ceiling, their contents bound in rich leather and gilded lettering. Officer, candidate bay. Grand fireplace stood at one end, its embers glowing faintly. A large oak desk sat in the centre of the room, covered in neat stacks of papers and ink bottles. Poirot ran a hand along the spines of the books. If Geoffrey left us a message here, we must determine how he intended for us to find it. Hastings sighed, eyeing the thousands of volumes. That could take weeks. Poirot smiled knowingly. Not if we apply the little grey cells, mon ami. He turned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle, did Geoffrey have a favourite book? She thought for a moment. Yes, he was particularly fond of the Count of Monte Cristo. He once told me that he admired how the protagonist used intelligence and patience to overcome his enemies. Poirot's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Ah, an excellent choice. Where is this book kept? Evelyn walked to one of the shelves near the fireplace. She ran her fingers along the spines until she found the title, and carefully pulled it out. The book was heavy, bound in dark green leather with gold lettering. Poirot took it from her, weighing it in his hands before flipping it open. His sharp eyes scanned the pages, searching for anything unusual. Then he paused. Nestled between the pages was a folded slip of paper. Hastings leaned in. Is that... Poirot carefully unfolded the paper. On it was a series of numbers, written in Geoffrey Martin's distinctive hand. 7. 21. 3. 19 Hastings groaned. Not another code. Poirot, however, seemed delighted. Mais non, mon ami, this is most intriguing. He studied the numbers, his mind working quickly. They are too low to be financial figures, too high to be a simple date. Ah, but Hastings, do they not remind you of something? Hastings frowned. Should they? Poirot smiled indulgently. Think back to our school days. These numbers correspond to letters in the alphabet. Hastings blinked, then did the mental math. O-G-U-C-S. Evelyn furrowed her brow. That doesn't make sense. Poirot turned the slip of paper over, checking for more clues, and then a realization struck him. Mes amis, Geoffrey Martin was well read, was he not? Evelyn nodded. Yes, of course. Then let us try another approach. Poirot moved to the oak desk and found a small notebook, its pages covered in Geoffrey's handwriting. He flipped through it until he found a passage written in Latin. His eyes narrowed in concentration before he snapped his fingers. These numbers do not correspond to English words. They refer to a Latin cipher. Hastings groaned again. Latin? I barely survived school because of that blasted language. Poirot ignored him and quickly translated the letters into their Latin equivalents. His expression turned serious. "What is it?" Lady Willoughby asked. Poirot set the paper down. "The letters form the word occultus." Evelyn's breath hitched. "That means hidden in Latin." Lady Willoughby turned pale. "Hidden? But hidden what?" Poirot tapped the desk. "That, my dear lady, is what we must uncover." At that moment, the fire sputtered violently in the grate, sending a shower of embers onto the rug. A gust of wind howled through the corridor outside. The sound of something heavy falling echoed from somewhere in the house. Everyone turned toward the door. "What was that?" Hastings asked. Poirot was already moving. "We are not alone." He strode quickly to the corridor, peering into the darkness. A shadow flickered at the far end, a silhouette moving swiftly down the hallway. Poirot turned back to Hastings. "Come, mon ami, the game is afoot." Hastings hesitated. "That's Sherlock Holmes." Poirot sighed. "Fine, the chase begins." They took off down the corridor, following the sound of hurried footsteps. The chase led them through the darkened hallways of Blackwood Hall, past looming suits of armour and paintings whose painted eyes seemed to watch their every move. At last they reached the servants' wing. A door at the far end slammed shut. Poirot and Hastings raced toward it, Poirot in the lead despite his smaller frame. Hastings reached for the handle and yanked it open, only to find the room beyond was empty. Poirot stepped inside, scanning the room with keen eyes. A single candle flickered on a nearby desk, illuminating a stack of letters. Poirot walked forward, plucking up the topmost letter. His brows furrowed as he read the name on the envelope. "Who is it addressed to?" Hastings asked, breathless. Poirot turned the envelope toward them. "Geoffrey Martin." A hush fell over the room. Poirot carefully unfolded the letter, reading its contents in silence. When he was done, he set it down and looked at the others gravely. "What does it say?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Poirot's eyes flickered with intensity. "It appears Geoffrey Martin knew far more than we thought." He gestured to the letter, which contained only a single chilling sentence. "If you are reading this, then I am already dead." Chapter 5. Shadows in the Corridor. Hush fell over the room. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows against the walls, as if the very house was holding its breath. Hastings shifted uncomfortably. The weight of Geoffrey Martin's ominous message settled over them like a thick fog. Poirot, however, remained motionless, his keen eyes fixed on the letter. He read it again, his lips moving slightly as he committed every word to memory. Then carefully, he folded the parchment and slipped it into his pocket. Lady Willoughby's voice broke the silence. "This is preposterous. Geoffrey could not have known his own fate." Poirot turned to her, his expression unreadable. "And yet, madame, here we stand, confronted with his words from beyond the grave." He gestured to the letter. "This was written in advance, an anticipation of danger." That, in itself, is most telling. Evelyn Blackwood, still pale from the chase through the corridors, spoke up. But what does it mean? If he knew he was in danger, why didn't he go to the police? Poirot steepled his fingers. Perhaps he did not trust the police, or perhaps he did not have the opportunity before fate intervened. His voice lowered. We must ask ourselves, who was Geoffrey afraid of, and why? Hastings exhaled sharply. Well, I'd say we just about confirmed that someone is skulking about this house, trying to cover their tracks. Lady Willoughby sat down heavily in a nearby chair. You believe there is a murderer among us? Poirot's gaze did not waver. I do not believe, madame. I know. A sharp rap at the door made them all jump. They turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, breathing heavily. It was Harris, the butler. His normally unshakable composure was rattled, his forehead beaded with sweat. Sir, he addressed Poirot, his voice hoarse. There is something you must see. Poirot rose immediately, his interest piqued. Lead the way, monsieur. Harris hesitated, his gaze flitting to Lady Willoughby. It is quite distressing, madam. Lady Willoughby stiffened. Just tell us, man. Harris swallowed, then spoke in a low, urgent whisper. There has been another incident. The word sent a chill through the room. Poirot did not waste a moment. He strode past Harris and into the hallway, Hastings and the others following close behind. The butler led them down the corridor, deeper into the servants' wing, where the air was thick with an oppressive silence. At last they reached a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. Harris paused, hesitated, then pushed it open. The room inside was small, modestly furnished, a servant's quarters. But it was not the decor that drew everyone's attention. It was the man slumped over the desk. Poirot stepped forward, eyes sharp as he took in the scene. The man's head rested at an unnatural angle, his arm sprawled limply over the wooden surface. A candle had burned down to a stub, the wax dripping onto a stack of papers beside him. Evelyn let out a soft gasp. That's Mr. Cole, the estate steward. Poirot's expression darkened. And he is dead. Hastings exhaled sharply. Good heavens, another death. Poirot leaned closer. There was no blood, no visible wound. He inspected the man's face, noting the bluish tinge around his lips. Then his sharp eyes landed on the overturned teacup near the steward's hand. Poirot lifted it carefully, sniffing the remnants inside. Poison, he murmured. Lady Willoughby's hand flew to her mouth. Poison? Are you sure? Poirot set the cup down gently. Quite sure, madame. The symptoms, discoloration of the lips, the slackness of the limbs, suggest a fast-acting toxin. Mr. Cole was murdered. Hastings ran a hand through his hair. But why? Why kill him? Poirot straightened. That, my dear Hastings, is what we must determine. He turned to Harris. Who discovered the body? The butler hesitated. One of the maids, sir. She came to deliver fresh linen and found him like this. She ran screaming through the halls. Poirot nodded. And when did you last see Mr. Cole alive? Harris thought for a moment. At supper, sir. He was in good spirits then. Did he mention anything unusual? Any concerns? Harris frowned. Not to me, sir. But he did seem rather preoccupied with something. Kept glancing toward the library. Poirot exchanged a look with Hastings. The library. Again, he turned back to Harris. Was Mr. Cole known to keep any personal records? A ledger, perhaps? Harris nodded. Yes, sir. He kept detailed accounts of all estate matters. His ledger should be in the top drawer of his desk. Poirot moved swiftly, pulling open the drawer. Inside he found a thick leather-bound book, its spine worn from years of use. He flipped it, open, scanning the most recent entries, and then he stopped. There, written in Mr. Cole's careful handwriting, was a name that sent a shiver down Poirot's spine. Geoffrey Martin. Hastings peered over his shoulder. He wrote Geoffrey's name. Poirot nodded slowly. Oui, mon ami, and not just his name. Look here. He pointed to the entry where a sum of money had been recorded, a significant sum. Beside it, in hurried script, was a single note. Blackmail. Evelyn gasped. Blackmail? But by whom? Poirot snapped the ledger shut. That is what we must find out. Lady Willoughby's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you think Mr. Cole was blackmailing Geoffrey, or the other way around? Poirot's gaze was unreadable. It is too soon to say. But what we do know is that Mr. Cole was involved in something much larger than simple estate management, and now he is dead. Hastings exhaled. So first Geoffrey disappears, then we find a warning letter from him, and now the estate steward is poisoned. Someone is going to great lengths to keep their secrets hidden. Poirot nodded grimly. Indeed, and that means we are close to the truth. At that moment, the corridor outside creaked. Everyone turned, sharply, tension crackling in the air. Poirot took a slow step toward the door. We are being watched. A flicker of movement, a shadow slipping away into the darkness. Poirot darted forward, Hastings right behind him. They burst into the hallway just in time to see the edge of a dark coat vanishing around the corner. Without hesitation, Poirot gave chase. Footsteps echoed through the manor as they pursued the unknown figure through the winding halls. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the path ahead, making every turn a blind risk. At last they reached the grand staircase. The figure was just ahead, descending rapidly. Poirot pushed himself faster, his heartbeat thrumming in his ears. But just as they neared the bottom, the figure suddenly disappeared. Hastings blinked. Where did they go? Poirot scanned the area, his mind racing. Then his gaze landed on an unassuming wooden panel along the wall. A hidden passage. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression determined. Mon ami, we have just stepped into the heart of the mystery. Hastings swallowed. And what do we do now? Poirot smiled grimly. We go forward. And with that, he pressed the hidden latch, revealing the secrets of Blackwood Hall. Chapter 6. The Secret Passage. The panel swung open with a faint creak, revealing a darkened corridor beyond. The air that wafted out was cool and stale, carrying the scent of old stone and damp wood. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he took a step forward, Hastings hesitating only slightly before following. Evelyn Blackwood clutched the fabric of her dress. Where does that lead? She whispered. Poirot turned to her. That, mademoiselle, is precisely what we are about to discover. Harris, the butler, held up a lantern. Shall I accompany you, sir? Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Monsieur Harris. Your assistance is most welcome." The three men stepped cautiously into the hidden passage, the flickering lantern casting long shadows against the uneven stone walls. The corridor was narrow, forcing them to move single file, their footsteps muffled against the damp floor. Hastings glanced around uneasily. "I must say, Poirot, this is becoming quite the ghost story. First, a missing butler, then a dead steward, and now secret passages." Poirot did not slow his pace. "You see, mon ami, every grand house, such as Blackwood Hall, has its hidden veins, tunnels meant for servants in the old days, or for more clandestine purposes. Someone has made good use of them." Harris spoke in a hushed voice. "I had no idea this existed. I've worked at Blackwood Hall for years, and I've never seen this passage before." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps that was by design, Monsieur Harris." The tunnel twisted sharply, revealing a staircase leading downward. The air grew colder as they descended, the flickering light barely illuminating the rough-hewn steps. Poirot moved carefully, his gaze darting along the walls. Then, abruptly, he stopped. A sound, faint but unmistakable. A rustling noise, as if someone or something was moving ahead of them. Hastings tensed. "Did you hear that?" Poirot nodded, holding up a hand for silence. Harris gripped the lantern tightly, his knuckles whitening. The sound came again, closer this time. Then, without warning, the tunnel plunged into darkness. The lantern had gone out, a startled curse from Harris, a sharp intake of breath from Hastings. Poirot remained perfectly still, his ears straining against the silence. Then, footsteps, rushing toward them. Poirot barely had time to react before something or someone brushed past him in the pitch black, the force nearly knocking him off balance. A muffled cry from Hastings as he fumbled in the dark. Poirot twisted, reaching out, but his hands grasped only empty air, then silence once more. Hastings exhaled sharply. "Good Lord, who was that?" Poirot straightened, his tone calm despite the tension in the air. "Someone who did not wish to be seen, mon ami." Harris relit the lantern with shaking hands, the flame sputtering back to life. The passage was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. Poirot turned to Harris. "Did you see anything?" Harris shook his head. "Just a blur, sir. It was too dark." Poirot's gaze swept the tunnel. "They knew we were coming." He bent down, studying the floor. There, in the dust, were fresh footprints, leading deeper into the passage. He straightened. "We follow." They pressed on, the tunnel growing narrower, the air heavier. The passage twisted sharply once more before finally opening into a larger chamber. Harris held up the lantern, casting light on the space. It was an old storage room, the walls lined with dusty crates and rusted tools. But it was not the objects that caught their attention. It was the table in the centre of the room, and the pile of documents spread across it. Poirot moved swiftly, scanning the papers. Ledgers, receipts, and letters. Letters addressed to Geoffrey Martin. Hastings peered over his shoulder. These belonged to Geoffrey? Poirot picked up one of the letters, unfolding it carefully. His expression darkened. This, he said softly, is a confession. Hastings blinked. Confession? Poirot tapped the paper. It is a letter written by Geoffrey, and it suggests that he was entangled in something most sinister. Harris stepped closer. What does it say? Poirot read aloud, his voice low and deliberate. I fear that I have made a terrible mistake. I thought I could control it, but now I am in over my head. If anything happens to me, look to Blackwood Hall. The truth is buried here. Hastings exhaled sharply. That's damning, isn't it? Poirot folded the letter. It is evidence, mon ami, and evidence is what we need. Harris shifted uncomfortably. If Geoffrey knew he was in danger, why didn't he escape? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps he was prevented. At that moment, a noise from behind made them all turn. The door leading out of the chamber was closing, slowly, but with purpose. Someone was locking them in. Hastings lunged, but it was too late. The heavy wooden door thudded shut. A metallic click echoed through the room. They were trapped. Harris rushed forward, tugging at the handle. It won't budge. Poirot remained composed. Calm yourself, Monsieur Harris. There is always a way out. Hastings glanced around. Any brilliant ideas, Poirot? Poirot's gaze swept the room. Then his eyes landed on the far wall, a faint outline in the stone. A door, he murmured. Harris turned. A second exit? Poirot nodded. Oui, but it has not been used in some time. He ran his hands along the stone, searching for a mechanism. Hastings stepped forward. Let me help. Together they pressed against the outline, feeling for any movement. Then, with a groan of old hinges, the stone panel gave way, revealing another passage. Poirot smiled, and thus the mouse escapes the trap. They hurried through the opening, emerging into yet another narrow corridor. The tunnel twisted sharply before leading them up a flight of steps. At the top, a small wooden door stood slightly ajar. Poirot pushed it open, stepping through, and found himself in the Blackwood Hall library. Hastings blinked. Well, that was unexpected. Poirot dusted himself off. On the contrary, mon ami, it was most expected. Harris peered around the library. But what does this mean? Poirot's expression was grave. It means that everything, every clue, every secret circles back to this very room. At that moment a voice cut through the silence. Well, well, what an interesting discovery. They turned sharply. Standing near the fireplace was a figure, a woman dressed impeccably in dark silk, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. Lady Willoughby. Poirot inclined his head. Madame. She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the group. You have been very busy, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot smiled slightly. One must be thorough, madame. She folded her hands. And what, pray, have you discovered? Poirot studied her, that secrets do not stay buried forever. She held his gaze. No, they do not. Poirot tilted his head. And you, madame? What secrets do you keep? A pause. Then slowly she smiled, and in that moment Poirot knew Lady Willoughby was hiding something. Chapter 7. The Lady's Deception. Hercule Poirot stepped forward, his keen eyes locked onto Lady Willoughby's poised expression. There was something in her stance, something deliberate in the way she carried herself, as if she had been expecting. "This moment, madame," he said, his voice smooth yet firm. "You have been watching us closely, have you not?" Lady Willoughby arched a delicate eyebrow. "Watching you, Monsieur Poirot? I'm afraid I don't follow." Poirot gestured around the grand library. "You appear at precisely the right moment, just as we emerge from a passage known to very few. That is either remarkable coincidence, or—" his moustache twitched slightly— "deliberate intent." Lady Willoughby chuckled, a sound as polished as her demeanour. "Perhaps I merely have excellent timing." Hastings, standing at Poirot's side, crossed his arms. "Forgive me, Lady Willoughby, but this whole business is rather odd. A secret passage, a missing butler, a murdered steward, and now we find you waiting for us." She sighed and moved to the fireplace, resting a delicate hand against the mantel. "You see shadows where there are none, Captain Hastings." Poirot stepped closer. "Ah, but madame, one does not need to see a shadow to know it exists." The room fell into silence, save for the crackling of the fire. Lady Willoughby's fingers tightened against the wood before she exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "You are quite the observer, Monsieur Poirot." She turned toward them, her face unreadable. "Very well. If you must know, I heard voices. I was passing by when I noticed the panel in the bookshelf shifting. Naturally, I was curious." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, madame, I suspect you knew of that passage long before tonight." Her lips parted slightly before she regained her composure. "That is a serious accusation, Monsieur Poirot." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Ah, but I have not accused you of anything, madame. I merely observe." A slight frown flickered across her face. "And what precisely do you observe?" Poirot's expression did not change. "That you have not asked the most pertinent question." She hesitated. "And what question is that?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "What we found in the passage." A silence stretched between them. Lady Willoughby's fingers twitched against the mantelpiece, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Hastings. "Tell me, mon ami, if you had just stumbled upon a group of men emerging from a hidden tunnel beneath your home, would your first reaction not be to ask what they had discovered?" Hastings blinked. "Well, yes, I suppose so." Poirot looked back at Lady Willoughby. "And yet, madame, you did not." She sighed. "Perhaps I simply assumed that, whatever you found, it was of no consequence." Poirot's smile grew. "Ah, but that is the heart of the matter, is it not? You assumed." A shadow passed over her face. "You are playing a dangerous game, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's voice remained calm. "And yet, madame, I do not play games. I seek only the truth." Lady Willoughby exhaled, turning toward the fire. I did not wish to involve myself in any of this," she said quietly, "but I see now that it may be unavoidable." Hastings frowned. "Then you do know something." She turned back, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, I know more than I have admitted." Poirot nodded, his expression betraying no surprise. "Then, madam, I suggest you tell us everything." She hesitated only briefly before she moved to one of the chairs and sat, folding her hands in her lap. "There are things about Blackwood Hall that even I do not fully understand," she began. My late husband, Lord Willoughby, was an exceedingly private man. He kept secrets, some of which I suspect are buried within these walls." Poirot listened intently, his fingers tracing the edge of his lapel. "And how does Geoffrey Martin fit into those secrets?" Lady Willoughby's gaze darkened. "Geoffrey was not just our butler. He was something more. A confidant to my husband. He knew things." Hastings leaned forward. "What sort of things?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "That I do not know, but I do know that whatever he knew, it was valuable and dangerous." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Dangerous enough to kill for." She met his gaze, and for the first time there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Yes." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a heavy fog. Poirot broke the silence first. "Then Geoffrey Martin's disappearance is no mere coincidence." He was silenced. Lady Willoughby's lips pressed together. "I fear so." Hastings exhaled. "Good heavens! But who would want to harm him?" Lady Willoughby's gaze flickered to the side, as if weighing her words. Carefully. "There was one man my husband frequently met with in secret. A businessman, Reginald Crowley." Poirot's brows lifted. "Reginald Crowley?" She nodded. "He and my husband were involved in some financial dealings. I do not know the details, but I know that Geoffrey was often present for those meetings." Harris, who had remained quiet until now, suddenly spoke. "Reginald Crowley? That name. It sounds familiar." Lady Willoughby turned to him. "It should. He was a guest here not long ago." Poirot clasped his hands. "Then it is time we paid Monsieur Crowley a visit." Lady Willoughby hesitated. "Be careful, Monsieur Poirot. If Crowley is involved in this, he is a very dangerous man." Poirot merely smiled. "Ah, madame, danger and I are old acquaintances." The following morning, Poirot and Hastings arrived at the grand estate of Yaouf, Reginald Crowley. The house was imposing, its high gates guarded by stone lions, and its entrance adorned with marble columns. A butler, an older man with a grim expression, led them into a vast sitting-room where Reginald Crowley waited. Crowley was a stout man, in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and piercing blue eyes. He did not rise as they entered, merely regarding them with a measured gaze. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume," he said, his voice smooth but edged with suspicion. Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed, monsieur. And this is my esteemed friend, Captain Hastings." Crowley gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. What brings you to my home?" Poirot sat, folding his hands. "A matter of some urgency, Monsieur Crowley. We are investigating the disappearance of one Geoffrey Martin." A flicker of something, discomfort perhaps, crossed Crowley's face before he masked it with an indifferent expression. "Geoffrey Martin? The butler?" "Oui. You knew him, did you not?" Crowley leaned back. "I suppose I did. He was present during some of my meetings with Lord Willoughby." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Meetings of a business nature?" Crowley's expression hardened. "That is none of your concern." Poirot smiled. "Ah, but you see, monsieur, it is very much my concern, because it would seem that those meetings, whatever their purpose, may be the very reason Geoffrey Martin has disappeared." Crowley's fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair. "I do not know what you are insinuating, Poirot, but I had nothing to do with his disappearance." Poirot studied him. "Then perhaps you will not mind answering a simple question." Crowley's eyes narrowed. "That depends on the question." Poirot's voice was quiet but firm. What was Geoffrey Martin so afraid of? A long silence followed. Then, slowly, Crowley exhaled and leaned forward. "I suggest you be very careful, Monsieur Poirot. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed." Poirot did not waver. "Ah, but some doors must be opened, especially when they lead to the truth." Crowley's eyes gleamed dangerously. "Then I suggest you prepare yourself for what you might find." Chapter 8. The Man in the Shadows. Hercule Poirot sat in the dimly lit drawing-room of Blackwood Hall, his keen eyes fixed on the flickering flames in the hearth. The conversation with Reginald Crowley had unsettled him, not because Crowley had denied involvement in Geoffrey Martin's disappearance, but because he had done so too smoothly, too precisely. A man accustomed to lying was often the most dangerous sort. Hastings paced behind him, his frustration evident. "Dash it all, Poirot! Crowley all but threatened us back there." Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. "Ah, mon ami, threats are the weapons of the guilty. Did you notice how he tried to turn the conversation away from Geoffrey Martin? That tells us more than if he had denied everything outright." Hastings frowned. "Still, it doesn't help us much. We need to find Geoffrey." Poirot nodded. "And we shall, Hastings. But first we must follow the shadows, because it is in the darkness that the truth hides." A sharp knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Inspector Harris entered, his face lined with concern. "Poirot, I've just received word from one of my men. A witness has come forward, someone who claims to have seen Geoffrey Martin on the night he disappeared." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "And where is this witness now?" Harris gestured toward the hallway. "Waiting in the study." Poirot rose immediately, straightening his cuffs. "Then we must not keep them waiting." The study was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the cold night outside. A nervous-looking man sat in one of the armchairs, twisting his cap in his hands. He was middle-aged, with thinning hair and darting eyes. He looked up as Poirot entered, swallowing hard. Harris introduced him. "This is Alfred Dawson. He works as a groundskeeper on the estate." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Dawson, you have seen something of importance, I believe?" Dawson nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I didn't want to speak at first. Didn't want to get involved, see? But then I heard about Mr. Martin going missing, and I thought, well, maybe it means something." "Please, tell us exactly what you saw," Poirot encouraged, his voice gentle. Dawson took a deep breath. "It was late that night. Must have been close to midnight. I was locking up the tool shed when I saw someone moving near the old stables. Thought it was one of the other staff, but then I realized it was Mr. Martin." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "You are certain it was Geoffrey Martin?" "As certain as I am sitting here, sir." Hastings leaned forward. "And was he alone?" Dawson hesitated. "At first I thought so. But then I saw someone else step out from the shadows. A man. I couldn't see his face, but he was tall, broad-shouldered. He spoke to Mr. Martin, and, well, it wasn't a friendly conversation." Poirot exchanged a glance with Harris. "Did you hear what was said?" Dawson shook his head. "No, sir." But it wasn't long before Mr. Martin turned and started walking toward the manor. The other man followed him. I don't know what happened after that. Poirot steepled his fingers. And you did not recognize this other man at all? Dawson shook his head again. No, sir, but there's something else. Go on, Harris urged. Dawson hesitated, his fingers tightening on his cap. Before Mr. Martin left the stables, he looked around real quick, like he was afraid someone was watching him. And then he dropped something Poirot's breath caught. What did he drop? Dawson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver cufflink. He placed it on the desk. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. The intricate engraving on its surface made his moustache twitch with interest. "This is no ordinary cufflink," he murmured. "This belongs to a man of wealth, of status." He turned to Harris. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, I believe we have just been handed a most valuable clue." An hour later, Poirot, Hastings, and Harris gathered in the drawing-room once more. The cufflink rested on the table between them, gleaming under the lamp's light. Hastings frowned. "I don't see how this helps us, Poirot. Anyone in the manor could own a cufflink like this." Poirot smiled. "Ah, mon ami, but not quite. Look closely. Do you see the engraving?" Hastings peered at it. "There's a crest of some sort. A coat of arms? Exactly." Poirot turned to Harris. "You are familiar with noble families, are you not, Inspector?" Harris nodded. "Yes, and that crest, it belongs to Reginald Crowley." A charged silence followed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we now have proof that Crowley was involved in Geoffrey Martin's disappearance." Hastings exhaled. "Good Lord, but why? What could Crowley possibly want with Martin?" Poirot's smile faded. "That, Hastings, is the question we must answer before it is too late." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings made their way to Reginald Crowley's estate once more. This time, the air was different, charged, expectant. Crowley met them in the same sitting room, though there was a stiffness to his manner. "Back again, Poirot," he said coolly. "Indeed, monsieur." Poirot placed the cufflink on the table before him. "This belongs to you, I believe." Crowley's expression did not change, but a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. "Where did you find that?" Poirot smiled. "Near the stables of Blackwood Hall, the night Geoffrey Martin disappeared." For the first time, Crowley's mask of indifference slipped. He leaned forward slightly, his hands tightening on the arms of his chair. "That doesn't prove anything." Poirot's gaze did not waver. "No, perhaps not, but it does tell me that you were there that night." Crowley exhaled sharply. "Damn it, Poirot, you don't understand." "Then enlighten me, monsieur." A long silence followed. Then Crowley rubbed a hand over his face. "I was there, but I didn't harm Geoffrey." Hastings scoffed. "Then what were you doing sneaking around the stables at midnight?" Crowley hesitated before answering. "I was meeting with him. He had information that I needed." Poirot leaned forward. "Information regarding Lord Willoughby's business dealings?" Crowley's jaw clenched. "Yes." Poirot's voice was quiet but firm. "And what happened after you spoke?" Crowley exhaled. "He said he had proof, documents that would expose everything. He was going to give them to me, but before he could, someone else arrived." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Crowley's gaze darkened. "I don't know. But whoever it was, they took Geoffrey." Hastings inhaled sharply. "Took him? You mean—" Crowley nodded grimly. "He was dragged away. I tried to follow, but I lost them in the dark." Poirot sat back, his mind whirring. The pieces were falling into place. But one crucial element remained. If Geoffrey Martin had been taken, where was he now? And more importantly, was he still alive? Chapter 9. The Vanishing Point. Hercule Poirot sat in deep contemplation. His fingers pressed together beneath his chin. The revelations from Reginald Crowley had added yet another layer of intrigue to the already tangled web of deception at Blackwood Hall. Geoffrey Martin had not simply vanished, he had been taken. And if Crowley was telling the truth, then someone else had been lurking in the shadows that night, waiting to strike. Hastings, ever restless, paced the length of the drawing-room. "Dash it all, Poirot! This case keeps getting murkier by the minute. If Martin was taken, why hasn't there been a ransom demand? Why would someone go to such lengths to make him disappear?" Poirot glanced at his friend with a knowing smile. "Ah, Hastings, you touch upon the very heart of the mystery. It is not merely that he vanished, it is why he was made to vanish that interests me most." Inspector Harris, who had been listening intently, exhaled sharply. "We need to assume the worst. If someone wanted him gone because of what he knew, he may not be alive." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Perhaps. But we must not jump to conclusions without evidence." He leaned forward. "We must return to Blackwood Hall immediately." Hastings blinked. "Whatever for?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, mon ami, I suspect we have been looking at this case all wrong, and I intend to prove it." The drive back to Blackwood Hall was a tense one. The manor loomed in the distance, its silhouette stark against the dimming sky. Poirot, usually one for pleasant conversation, remained silent, his sharp mind piecing together the puzzle. Upon arrival, they were met at the door by Mrs. Tillingham, the housekeeper, who wrung her hands nervously. "Oh, Mr. Poirot, I heard you'd be coming back. I do hope you found some clue about poor Mr. Martin." Poirot regarded her shrewdly. "Tell me, madam, has anything unusual happened since we last spoke?" The woman hesitated. "Well, sir, there was something. This morning, when I was dusting the library, I noticed something peculiar." Harris stepped forward. "Peculiar how?" Mrs. Tillingham bit her lip. "It was the bookshelf, sir. Someone had moved a book, a heavy old volume, and behind it there was a gap in the wall." Poirot's eyes lit up. "A hidden compartment?" She nodded. "Aye, sir, and inside— well, I didn't know what to make of it." Poirot gestured. "Take us there at once, madam." The library of Blackwood Hall was grand, its towering bookshelves lined with dusty tomes. Mrs. Tillingham led them to one of the farthest corners, where a single book lay askew on the shelf. Poirot carefully removed it, revealing a narrow opening in the wood panelling. He reached inside and withdrew a bundle of papers tied together with string. The edges were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. Hastings peered over his shoulder. "What is it, Poirot?" Poirot carefully untied the bundle and scanned the first page. His breath hitched. "Mon Dieu!" Harris frowned. What does it say?" Poirot read aloud. "Memorandum of illicit transactions between Lord Willoughby and overseas partners. details of embezzlement, fraud, and political influence. A heavy silence fell over the room. Hastings let out a low whistle. Well, that explains a great deal. Harris nodded grimly. Geoffrey Martin must have found this and realized its significance. He had proof of corruption, something powerful enough to ruin Lord Willoughby. Poirot carefully replaced the papers. And now we know why he was silenced. Hastings stiffened. But does this mean Lord Willoughby was behind his disappearance? Poirot tapped his fingers against the shelf. Perhaps, or perhaps there is another hand at play. One we have not yet seen. As the night deepened, Poirot and Hastings retired to their quarters in the manor, their minds buzzing with unanswered questions. Poirot sat by the window, gazing out at the sprawling gardens below. "Hastings, tell me, what do we know for certain?" Hastings sighed. That Geoffrey Martin had damning evidence against Lord Willoughby. That Reginald Crowley met him the night he disappeared. That someone else was lurking in the shadows. Poirot nodded. "And what do we not know?" "Well," Hastings said slowly, "we don't know where Martin is, or if he's still alive." "Precisely," Poirot murmured. "And that, my friend, is what we must find out before it is too late." At that moment, a soft knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Hastings opened it to find one of the maids, pale and trembling. "Mr. Poirot, sir, you must come quickly." Poirot rose at once. "What has happened?" The maid swallowed. "It's Mr. Martin, sir. He's been found." They followed the maid through the darkened halls to the servants' quarters. A small crowd had gathered outside a locked storage room, whispering anxiously. Harris arrived just as Poirot did, his face tense. "What's going on?" The maid pointed to the door. "One of the footmen heard noises coming from inside. We think it's him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Open the door." A butler fumbled with the keys before unlocking it. The door creaked open, revealing a figure slumped against the wall. Geoffrey Martin. He was alive, barely. His clothes were torn, his face bruised. His eyes fluttered open as Poirot knelt beside him. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "Monsieur Martin, can you hear me?" Martin groaned weakly. "Poirot!" Hastings exhaled sharply. "Good heavens, he's alive!" Harris signalled for help. "We need a doctor." Poirot gently took Martin's hand. "Who did this to you?" Martin coughed, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't Willoughby." Poirot's breath caught. "Then who?" Martin's fingers trembled as he clutched Poirot's sleeve. His lips moved, forming a single name before he lost consciousness. Poirot's eyes widened. Hastings leaned forward. What did he say? Poirot rose slowly, his expression grave. He said, "Reginald Crowley." A stunned silence followed. Harris's jaw clenched. So Crowley was behind it after all. Poirot's gaze was distant. "Perhaps." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean, perhaps?" Poirot turned toward the darkened hallway. "There is one last piece missing, Hastings. One final truth that has yet to be revealed." His voice dropped to a whisper, and I intend to uncover it before the night is through. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. A heavy silence fell over the room as Geoffrey Martin's whispered accusation lingered in the air. Poirot, ever composed, stood slowly, his keen eyes scanning the faces around him. Inspector Harris muttered a curse under his breath. "So it was Crowley all along," Harris said. "He was the one who took Martin, the one who wanted him silenced." But Poirot merely shook his head. "No, mon ami, it is not so simple." Hastings blinked. "What dieu do you mean, Poirot? Martin named Crowley himself." Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. "Ah, Hastings, but what precisely did he say? He did not say Crowley did this. He merely uttered the name Reginald Crowley." Harris frowned. "You're splitting hairs, Poirot." "No, I am considering the weight of a dying man's words." Poirot gestured toward the barely conscious Martin. He was not naming his attacker. He was naming the key to the mystery. The realization sent a murmur through the gathered household staff. Hastings looked between Poirot and Martin, struggling to follow the great detective's reasoning. "If it wasn't Crowley, then who?" he asked. Poirot straightened his cuffs. "Let us gather everyone in the drawing-room. The time has come to reveal the truth." The drawing-room of Blackwood Hall was thick with tension. Lord Willoughby sat stiff-backed in his chair, his expression one of cold indifference. Reginald Crowley stood near the fireplace, his usual smug confidence noticeably shaken. The remaining household staff huddled together, whispering anxiously. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs, I thank you for your patience. The time has come to explain what truly happened the night Geoffrey Martin disappeared." All eyes were on him now. He relished the moment, the charged anticipation before the grand revelation. "Let us begin with the facts," Poirot said. "Monsieur Martin was not merely a butler. He was also a man with a secret. He had in his possession documents that detailed the financial misdeeds of Lord Willoughby. This knowledge made him dangerous." Lord Willoughby scoffed but said nothing. Poirot continued. "Monsieur Martin discovered these papers and realized their significance, but he was not the only one aware of their existence. Someone else knew, someone who could not allow the truth to come to light." His gaze shifted to Crowley. "Reginald Crowley, you admitted to meeting Martin that night. You claimed he was worried, that he feared for his life." Crowley nodded stiffly. "That's right." "But you did not harm him," Poirot said. "No. Instead, you too were being watched. Someone followed you, saw your meeting with Martin, and acted before Martin could expose the truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Hastings leaned forward. "Then who was it?" Poirot smiled. It was someone who had far more to lose than Lord Willoughby. Someone who had been manipulating events from the shadows. Someone who orchestrated Martin's disappearance to throw suspicion elsewhere. His eyes locked onto the housekeeper. "Mrs. Tillingham." A stunned silence followed. The elderly woman gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "Me? Mr. Poirot, surely you don't mean—" Poirot nodded. "Oh, but I do, madam. You have played your part well, acting the role of the concerned housekeeper. But the truth is far darker." He took a step closer. "You were the one who discovered the hidden compartment before Martin did. You knew about Lord Willoughby's crimes, but you also knew that if those crimes came to light, your own involvement would be revealed. The room erupted into whispers. Harris frowned. Her involvement? What are you saying, Poirot? Poirot's voice was calm, measured. Mrs. Tillingham was not merely a bystander. She was an accomplice. For years, she aided Lord Willoughby in his financial dealings. Perhaps not out of greed, but out of loyalty. She was complicit in his affairs. Mrs. Tillingham's face paled. That's a terrible accusation, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's moustache twitched. Ah, but I have proof, madam. You see, when I examined the hidden compartment, I noticed something curious. Dust. The edges of the papers were smudged, as if they had been handled recently. And who had access to that library each day? Who dusted the very shelves where the documents were hidden? He pointed a finger at her. You, madame. You found the papers before Martin did. You panicked, and when he came across them as well, you knew you had to act. Hastings exhaled sharply. Good Lord, she was the one who attacked Martin. Poirot nodded. Oui, Hastings. She lured him into a trap, knocked him unconscious, and hid him away in the storage room. Inspector Harris turned to the housekeeper, his expression hard. Is this true, Mrs. Tillingham? The old woman trembled, her hands wringing together. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she nodded. Yes, it's true. A gasp rippled through the room. I didn't mean to hurt him, she whispered. I couldn't let him ruin everything. I've served this house for 40 years. I did what I had to do. Harris signalled his men. Mrs. Tillingham, I'm placing you under arrest. As the constables led her away, the weight of the mystery lifted. With the case solved, Poirot and Hastings returned to their lodgings. The next morning, Hastings found Poirot seated by the window, sipping his customary tisane. Well, Poirot, another case closed, Hastings said, pouring himself a cup of tea. Poirot nodded. Indeed, mon ami. And once again we see the truth in human nature, greed, fear, and deception. Hastings shook his head. I still can't believe it was the housekeeper all along. Poirot smiled. The quiet ones, Hastings, are often the most dangerous. As he leaned back in his chair, savouring the quiet moment, Poirot allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. Another mystery unravelled, another truth revealed, and the little grey cells, as always, had prevailed.